Magandang araw sa lahat. Welcome to the Legal Edge, the show where we dive deep into the intricate world of law and justice. I'm your host, Kate, and today we've got a real courtroom drama for you, minus the dramatic music and gavel smashing sound effects. Joining us today are two legal legends whose courtroom skills are stuff of a legend and maybe a little bit of myth. First up, we have Prosecutor Allan Mandi, a man so sharp they say he once convinced a polygraph to question itself. Legend has it he graduated magna cum laude from the International School of Relentless Justice and has prosecuted 999 cases, each one more airtight than a submarine at the bottom of the ocean. If justice had a heartbeat, he'd be the one setting up the rhythm. On the other side, we had attorney Ivylinde Llamera, a defense attorney so persuasive she once convinced a stoplight to turn green early. Armed with Juris Doctor from prestigious Academy of Impeccable Arguments, and a mind so quick it should be classified as a superpower. She's the kind of lawyer who could argue her way out of locked room with only a post-it note. Rumor has it she once cross-examined someone of their dreams, and they woke up apologizing. For today's episode, we'll be discussing the right of an accused, a fundamental constitutional right. Together, these two legal powerhouses will break down the essential safeguards in a way that will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about justice. Before we jump to our conversation with our esteemed guests, let's first lay down the groundwork. Now, in a democracy, the preservation and enhancement of human dignity is not just an ideal, but the core principle that upholds our civilization. Protecting the inviolable character of an individual ensures that one's thoughts, beliefs, and personhood remain protected to the greatest possible extent. The rights of an accused are not just legal technicalities. They are enshrined in the Constitution that uphold fairness, justice, and due process in our courts. The right of an accused are fundamental guarantees that prevent the abuse of state power and uphold the fairness in our judicial system. This right ensures that every individual facing criminal charges is afforded a fair and just trial. Now let's get into the specifics. Let's start with Prosecutor Allan. Hello, Prosecutor Allan. Happy to have you here. So, Prosec, can you walk us through why these rights are crucial, particularly in ensuring the integrity of criminal prosecutions?
Greetings to you, Kate. Thank you for having me here. Now, to your inquiry, these rights are crucial because they uphold the fairness and legitimacy of our criminal justice system and also ensures that the prosecutions are conducted with due process. They prevent wrongful convictions by requiring the state to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt while safeguarding the accused from arbitrary actions. Ultimately, these protections maintain public trust in the judiciary by balancing the power of the prosecution with the fundamental liberties of the accused.
That's a great point, Prosecutor Allan. These rights do not just serve the accused. They reinforce the very foundation of our justice system by ensuring that every case is built on fairness and due process. Now let's hear from the defense perspective. Attorney Ivy?
Sa defense counsel, these rights are the shield that protect individuals from the overwhelming power of the state, which wields extensive resources such as law enforcement, prosecutorial agencies, and investigatory tools. These safeguards ensure that no one is unjustly deprived of their liberty by guaranteeing proper legal representation, the right to challenge evidence, and the presumption of innocence. For instance, protection against warrantless arrest ensures that probable cause is required before someone's liberty is infringed upon. Though limited exceptions like arrest during a crime in plain view exist. Without these mechanisms, including the exclusionary rule, which prevents illegally obtained evidence from being used in court, wrongful convictions would be far more common, and justice would be compromised. These rights not only uphold fairness and due process, but also serve as the cornerstone of our legal system, ensuring that the power of the state is exercised responsibly and justly.
Attorney Ivy, let's be honest. When we talk about the right of the accused, a lot of people see this loopholes for criminals to escape justice. Pero sa harap ng hamong ito, isn't it true that these rights are often the last line of defense for ordinary citizens against the immense power of the state? Think about it to our 1 million viewers na laging tumututok sa legal edge. Paano kung kayo ang biglang iniresto ng walang paliwanag? O nasampahan ng kasong hindi nyo naman ginawa? Would you know your rights? Or would you fall victim to a system designed to crush the uniform? Attorney Ivy, why don't we start by breaking down these rights one by one? Ano ba talaga ang karapatan ng isang akusado? Paano sila nabibigyan ng proteksyon laban sa maling paghatol?
Kate, the justice system is built on the principle that every individual, no matter how strong the evidence may appear, deserves the full protection of the law. These rights are not privileges. They are essential safeguards that prevent the legal system from devolving into a machinery of oppression. Now, let's break down the 9 primary rights of the accused and explore how each one acts as a safeguard against injustice. First, we have the criminal due process. It includes bail. Tulad ng naunang tinalakay sa previous episode, the right to bail. Now, to refresh our mind about the topic, the right to bail is a crucial safeguard under criminal due process, ensuring that an accused person has the opportunity to remain free while awaiting trial, as long as they meet the condition set by the court. It upholds the principle of presumption of innocence and protects against unwarranted detention. However, we won't go over it again today as it was thoroughly discussed in the previous episode. Hopefully, everyone listened intently. Next, we have the presumption of innocence. Ang akusado ay walang kasalanan hanggang mapatunayan ito ng walang pagdududa. Third, we have the right to be heard and right to counsel. May karapatan ang akusado na marinig ang kanyang panig at magkaroon ng abogadong magtatanggol sa kanya. Next, we have right to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation. Kailangang ipaalam ng malinaw sa akusado ang kaso laban sa kanya. Next, right to a speedy, impartial, and public trial. Upang maiwasan ang matagal na pagkakakulong ng walang hatol at matiyak ang patas na paglilitis. Next, we have right to confront witnesses. Karapatan ng akusado na harapin at questionin ang mga titistigo laban sa kanya. Next, the right to secure the attendance of witnesses. Karapatan niyang ipatawag at ipresenta ang kanyang sariling mga testigo. Next, the compulsory process. Karapatan ng akusado na pilitin ang pagdalo ng mga kinakailangang saksi o ebidensya sa korte. And finally, we have the right to be present during trial and trial in absentia. Karapatan niyang personal na dumalo sa pagdilitis, ngunit maaaring siyang litisin kahit wala siya sa tiyak na sitwasyon. Isipin niyo mga tagapagpanood, kung kayo ay maakusahan ng isang krimen, gaano kahalaga para sa inyo ang mga karapatang ito? Sa tingin nyo, sapat na ba ang mga proteksyong ito upang matiyak ang patas na paglilitis? I-comment nyo na inyong mga opinion.
Wow, Attorney Ivy, that was an excellent breakdown of these fundamental rights. Mga tagapanood, naisip nyo ba kung paano kung wala ang mga proteksyong ito? Paano kung isang araw basta ka nalang akusahan ng walang paliwanag o pagkakataong ipagtanggol ang sarili? That's exactly why these rights exist, to prevent injustice and uphold fairness in our legal system. Now let's dive deeper into one of the most fundamental rights of an accused, the criminal due process. This is the very foundation that ensures fairness in every step of criminal case. It's what separates a system of justice from one of mere punishment. Prosecutor Allen, what exactly does due process mean in the context of criminal law?
Kate, you see, due process is the cornerstone of any legal system. Think of it this way. Hey, before we throw you in jail, we have at least to tell you why. So here it guarantees that the government cannot deprive someone of life, liberty, or property without following a fair process. In criminal cases, this means that the accused must be given notice of the charges against them, the opportunity to be heard in court, and the chance to defend themselves. Kung wala ka nito, parang nasa isang laban ka na hindi mo alam ang patakaran. Pero ikaw ang palaging napag-iinitan at sa malamang, talo ka kagad.
Exactly, Prosec Allen. Due process is essential for protecting individuals' rights. Without it, the justice system would be like a board game, where you don't know the rules but somehow still end up losing. Except in this case, the consequences are much worse than just losing a game. Due process ensures that trials are fair, that the accused isn't treated unfairly, and that legal procedures are strictly followed. Preferably with a lawyer who didn't learn law from watching Legally Blonde.
So in short, the government can't just say, surprise, you're guilty, and throw you in jail, right?
Exactly. And if they try, that's people like Attorney Ivy show up, ready to make their case with more passion than a reality TV contestant. Due process keeps the system in check and ensures that no one, no matter who they are, is railroaded by the legal system.
Uh-huh, that makes a lot of sense. But Prosec Allen, could you give us a real-life example of how due process has been applied in a case? I'm sure our listeners would love to see how this plays out in an actual courtroom.
Certainly, Kate, a perfect example would be the case of D versus People of the Philippines in 2016. In this case, the Supreme Court underscored the importance of due process as the cornerstone of justice. Specifically, the court ruled that if due process is violated, for instance, by failing to properly notify the accused of the charges or denying them the chance to present evidence in their defense, any judgment handed down would be invalid. In this case, the accused claimed that critical parts of the legal process were bypassed, preventing them from mounting a proper defense. Here, the Supreme Court took this very seriously because due process isn't just a procedural formality. It is a fundamental right that ensures fairness at every stage of the proceedings. This is part of the Bill of Rights, Article 3, Section 1, which states that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall any person be denied the equal protection of the laws. And Article 3, Section 14 of the 1987 Philippine Constitution also states that no person shall be held to answer for a criminal offense without due process of law. And in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall be presumed innocent until the contrary is proved, and shall enjoy the right to be heard by himself and counsel, to be informed of the nature of, and cause of the accusations against him, to have speedy, impartial, and public trial, to meet the witnesses face to face, and to have compulsory process to ensure the attendance of witnesses and the production of evidence in his behalf. However, after arraignment, trial may proceed notwithstanding the absence of the accused, provided that he has been duly notified and his failure to appear is unjustifiable. It is the same with the case of Labay versus Sandigan Bayan, where he was not furnished a copy of the complaint. Here, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Labay, finding that his constitutional right to due process was violated due to his inability to participate in the preliminary investigation meaningfully. So here, these two cases posits that whether it's ensuring the accused is informed of the charges, given access to legal counsel, or allowed to cross-examine witnesses, these rights form the bedrock of a fair trial. Now, without these safeguards, the legal system risks turning into a one-sided process where verdicts are rushed and justice becomes nothing more than an illusion. So this principle ties closely with the fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine, which ensures that the evidence obtained through unconstitutional or illegal means is deemed inadmissible in court. If the tree or the source of evidence is tainted, such as through the violation of due process, then the fruit itself or any derivative evidence cannot be used against the accused. So this aligns with the exclusionary rule, which is a principle designed to protect the judicial system integrity by encouraging authorities from bypassing constitutional safeguards. Parang ganito, kung ang puno ay nakatanim sa lupa ng paglabag sa due process, lahat ng bunga nito ay considered lason din. Kaya kahit anong tamis ng ebidensya, kung hindi naman tama ang pagkakuha nito, bawal yan. The court decision, particularly in the case of the versus the people of the Philippines, reaffirmed that no conviction can stand on a shaky procedural ground. Due process rather isn't just a shield to protect the innocent. It is also the foundation that upholds fairness of our legal system. And when rights like this are disregarded, it is not just the accused who suffers, but also the justice system itself is compromised.
Well, Prosecutor Allan, that's a powerful reminder of just how crucial due process is in protecting our rights and ensuring fairness. It's not about the procedure, it's about justice being done the right way. Mga tagapanood, isipin nyo ito. Paano kung kayo mismo ang nasa ganong sitwasyon? Dito natin makikita na ang due process ay hindi lang pangkonsepto. Ito ay isang kalasaglaban sa pang-aabuso at isang pundasyon ng tunay na hustisya. But due process is just one piece of a puzzle. Let's move on to another cornerstone of our justice system, one that serves as the ultimate protection against wrongful convictions, the presumption of innocence. Attorney Ivy, what does this principle mean in practice, and how does this principle intersect with our earlier discussion on due process?
Kate, the presumption of innocence means that until proven guilty, the accused is considered innocent. This principle is not just legal formality. It is a fundamental safeguard against wrongful punishment. The burden of proof rests entirely on the prosecution, meaning they must establish guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The accused does not have to prove their innocence because, in the eyes of the law, innocence is the default. Kung wala ang prinsipyong ito, kahit sino ay maaaring basta na lang parusahan ng walang sapat at matibay na ebidensya. Kaya, napakahalaga nito sa pagpapanatili ng isang makatarungan, balancing sistema ng hustisya. Isa itong proteksyon laban sa pang-aabuso ng kapangyarihan. Ang pagkonekta nito sa due process ay malinaw. Ang due process ang nagbibigay daan para sa patas, tamang paraan ng paghahatol, habang ang presumption of innocence ang nagbibigay ng isang proteksyon para hindi maging madali ang paghusga ng kasalanan.
Exactly. Without it, the justice system would be dangerously skewed in favor of the state. The Supreme Court made it crystal clear in the case of People of the Philippines versus Quiñones in 2020, where the prosecution must bring receipts. The accused is presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, and only clear, solid evidence can secure a conviction. Now here's a substantive point related to this. How do inquisitorial and adversarial legal system treat the presumption of innocence differently? In adversarial system like ours, the burden is fully on the prosecution to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt while the accused actively defends himself. But in inquisitorial system, where judges take an active role or investigatory role, there is a perception that presumption of innocence can be subtly affected. So here these differences highlight how various legal traditions uphold fairness in a unique ways. But let's talk about what really proof beyond reasonable doubt actually means. It does not require absolute certainty or the elimination of every possible doubt. The Supreme Court clarified in the case of Palencia versus People and Villarosa versus People in 2020 that the prosecution must establish each element of the alleged crime beyond a reasonable doubt. In the case of Palencia, the court ruled that the prosecution failed to demonstrate moral certainty regarding the integrity of the evidence due to the inconsistencies in the testimonies of the arresting officers and a significant break in the chain of custody. So these lapses render the corpus delicti or the body of the crime unproven, leading to the accused acquittal. Similarly, in the case of Villarosa, the court emphasized the need to prove intent and the evident bad faith and acquitting the accused after finding that his actions, through mistaken, lack malice. Both rulings reaffirm the principle that only clear, reliable, and untainted evidence can uphold a conviction. As outlined in Rule 133, Section 2 of the Rules of Court, these standards ensures that doubt is reasonable, not speculative. Now, when it comes to circumstantial evidence, there are three strict requirements. First, there must be more than one circumstance pointing to guilt. Second, the facts used as basis in inferences must be proven. And third, the combination of these circumstances must lead to only one logical conclusion, which is the guilt of the accused beyond a reasonable doubt. So this principle is deeply embedded in our legal system, particularly in the 1987 Philippine Constitution, specifically Article 3, Section 14, Paragraph 2 explicitly upholds it. At sa ating mga manonood dyan, paalala lang, basahin natin ang saligang batas. Baka isang araw, ito ay maging isang superhero natin kapag kailangan na nating ipagtanggol ang ating mga karapatan. And it is not just embedded in Philippine legal system, but also on a global scale. In the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or the UDHR Article 11, it guarantees that everyone charged with penal offense has the right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. Likewise, in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, or ICCPR Article 14, also affirms that the right to a fair trial. So these two international frameworks reinforce that justice isn't just about punishing the guilty. It's about ensuring fairness and protecting the innocent.
Ayan, to our beloved viewers, may assignment tayo mula kay Prosec Allan. Basahin ang 1987 Constitution. Baka nga naman isang araw, ito ang maging superhero nyo kapag bigla kayong nakasagupa ng isang legal na laban. O siya, sino rito ang may kopya ng saligang batas sa bookshelf nila? Wala? Naka-PDF? Okay na rin yan. But kidding aside, this all brings us back to the crucial point. The prosecution has to prove guilt, and it's not up to the defendant to prove they're innocent. Ang bigat ng responsibilidad, hindi ba? So, Prosec Allan, what kind of evidence would typically be required to overcome that presumption?
Kate, to overcome the presumption of innocence, the prosecution must meticulously establish the guilt of the accused beyond a reasonable doubt. This means that presenting is solid, credible, and substantial evidence. For example, physical evidence. These are objects or materials directly linked to the crime, such as fingerprints, weapons, or forensic traces. For instance, a murder weapon with the accused fingerprints. So this can be a crucial piece of evidence. Next is witness testimony. These are statements from individuals who have first-hand knowledge of the incident, and these statements must be consistent, reliable, and withstand cross-examination to hold weight in court. Third is expert analysis. These are opinions from forensic specialists, medical examiners, or other professionals that provide critical insights. For example, DNA evidence linking the accused to the crime scene can be a highly persuasive evidence. Lastly is the circumstantial evidence. While not a direct proof, but a strong chain of circumstantial evidence such as motive or suspicious behavior or patterns can support the prosecution's case when combined with other evidences.
Indeed, what a lengthy list, right? However, it's important to stress that every piece of evidence must pass rigorous legal scrutiny. The prosecution cannot rely on assumptions, hearsay, or weak connections. If any reasonable doubt remains in the mind of the judge, the accused is entitled to acquittal. In the case of Dungo versus People, the Supreme Court emphasized the importance of moral certainty in proving guilt, particularly in cases involving hazing under the anti-hazing law. The conviction highlighted accountability in such cases but reinforced that evidence must be sufficient and credible. Similarly, in Fuertes versus Senate, the court upheld the constitutionality of the anti-hazing law's rebuttable presumption of participation. As an American fraternity member explained, hazing is almost like performance art, where the so-called audience plays as much of a role as the neophytes at the center of the initiation rites. Hazing derives its effectiveness from the humiliation it achieves. Humiliation requires an audience, and the audience provides the provocation, goading the actors to escalate borderline conduct toward more extreme behavior that would otherwise be intolerable. In situations like this, the presence is participation. Hence, it also demonstrates the need for laws that balance individual rights with the prevention of hazing violence. In the case of Bartolome versus People, members of fraternity were held accountable under the same law, reinforcing the principle that solid evidence is the cornerstone of convictions. Now, let's address another common misconception: the prima facie evidence and presumption of guilt. The accused cannot be forced to present evidence before the prosecution has done its job, even if they plead guilty. This was made in Alejandro versus Pipito, where the Supreme Court ruled that forcing the accused to prove their innocence prematurely violates the presumption of innocence. Additionally, it's worth noting that the presumption of innocence applies only to natural persons, not juridical persons. In the case of Feeder International versus Court of Appeals, the court ruled that the corporation cannot invoke these rights because only individuals can be accused in a criminal case. Ang korporasyon bilang isang legal na entity ay walang pisikal na katawan na maaaring makasuhan, maaresto o makulong tulad ng isang individual. Dahil dito, ang pananagutan ng korporasyon ay kadalasang nalilimitahan sa mga pananagutang pinansyal at iba pang mga remedyo na nakapaloob sa batas, imbis na sa personal na parusa tulad ng pagkakabilanggo.
Attorney Ivy, that's really interesting. So, as we've clarified, corporations face financial accountability that can't be subjected to personal punishments like imprisonment. Suppose it makes sense. A corporation doesn't have a fund to fund or a cell to occupy, right? But that does make me wonder. In cases involving individuals, particularly those where public officers or police officers or government officials are involved, does their position automatically give their claim more weight in court? I mean, they're public servants doing their job. Shouldn't their word count for more?
Akit, madalas nga yung maling akala. Oo na may presumption of regularity sa official duties ng mga government officials. Pero, hindi ito nangangahulugan na mas matimbang agad ang kanilang salita kaysa sa akusado. Their testimony, while taken with respect, must still be backed by clear and solid evidence to hold up in court. Kaya kahit public servant sila, hindi sapat ang ranggo o posisyon para manaig sa kaso. After all, justice thrives on evidence, not titles. Kumbaga, hindi pwedeng uniforme lang ang laban. For instance, in the case of People versus Casco, the Supreme Court upheld the conviction because the law enforcement officers' adherence to the chain of custody rule supported the presumption of regularity in their actions. Conversely, in the case of People versus Garcia, the presumption of regularity in the performance of duties was critical, but it was only upheld because their testimonies were corroborated by strong and consistent evidence. Ang presumption of innocence ay isang pangunahing karapatan na hindi pwedeng baliwalain. Kung ang tanging basehan ng hatol ay ang paniniwalang tama lagi ang isang opisyal, di parang sinabi na rin nating hindi na kailangan ng ebidensya, di ba? But according to People versus Akuram, if there is other strong evidence supporting the report or testimony of an official, only then can it prevail. Simply put, a position alone is not enough to prove a case. Solid evidence is still required.
Oh, so just because an official says something doesn't automatically make it true. But wait, what if the evidence on both sides seem equally strong? Like, if the prosecution and the defense each have compelling evidence or arguments. So does that mean it's just a toss coin at that point? Heads, may sala. Tails, wala. And more importantly, is it possible for the accused to abuse their rights in a way that undermines justice? If so, should the law impose limits on certain rights?
That's a great question, Kate. And that brings us to the equipoise rule, one of the most fascinating aspects of our legal system. When the prosecution and the defense present equally balanced evidence, the presumption of innocence tilts the balance in favor of the accused. This is called the equipoise rule, and it was reaffirmed in the case of People versus Urzais, where it states that the equipoise rule states that where the inculpatory facts and circumstances are capable of two or more explanations, one of which is consistent with the innocence of the accused and the other is consistent with his guilt, then the evidence does not fulfill the rest of the moral certainty and it is not sufficient to support a conviction. The equipoise rule provides that where the evidence in a criminal case is evenly balanced, the constitutional presumption of innocence tilts the scale in favor of the accused. So in short, kapag patas ang ebidensya, panalo ang akusado. Because the prosecution bears the heavier burden of proof of proving guilt. This underscores one of the most vital principles in criminal law, which is it is far better for a guilty person to go free than an innocent person to be wrongly convicted. This is how serious the justice system takes the presumption of innocence. As for whether accused individuals can abuse their rights, the reality is yes, it is possible. For example, they could misuse legal technicalities to delay proceedings or suppress evidence on procedural grounds even if guilt is evident. However, this is why the law and the judicial discretion work in hand to ensure fairness while preventing abuse. Any limits imposed on the rights must be carefully calibrated to avoid undermining fundamental principles of justice like the presumption of innocence.
Well, Prosecutor Allan, that equipoise rule is truly absolutely fascinating. Parang legal balancing act na kapag tablang ebidensya, laging laban ang akusado. Pero speaking of balance and fairness, it's hard to imagine these concepts being upheld without one crucial right. The right to be heard or to have counsel. Now, Attorney Ivy, you've handled a lot of cases as a defense counsel, right? So can you give us a general overview of this right? Like, why is it such a cornerstone of justice? And how does it actually work in practice? Enlighten us naman po, lalo na sa ating mga beloved viewers dyan. Medyo blurred pa kasi sa amin ang concept na ito.
Nako, Kate, this right is truly fundamental. Ang karapatan na marinig ang panig mo or to have counsel ensures na ang bawat akusado, kahit gaano pa kaliit ang kakayahan o kaalaman nila sa batas, ay magkakaroon ng patas na laban. It's not just about having a voice, but about having someone knowledgeable to guide you through the legal maze. Imagine facing a trial ng walang alam sa legal process, parang sumasaba ka sa giyera na wala kang armas. Kaya ito, Kit, isa sa mga pinakamatibay na safeguards against any abuse or miscarriage of justice.
Eight, the right to be heard is a fundamental in any criminal prosecution. As stated in Section 14, Paragraph 2 of Article 3 of the 1987 Constitution, an accused shall enjoy the right to be heard by himself and counsel. This means that the accused must be given the opportunity to present evidence in their defense, be present at every stage of the proceedings, and ensure that they are not silenced by procedural shortcuts. According to the court, in the case of Ibanez versus People, an accused person who is not presented by counsel is effectively denied of the fair trial, which is equivalent to a serious violation of due process. One of the essential components of due process is the right to counsel. However, if the accused had representation during the trial and had a chance to defend themselves, then the mere lack of counsel at one hearing does not amount to the violation of these constitutional rights.
And let's not forget, Kate, that the right to be heard is closely tied to the right to counsel. Section 12, Paragraph 1, Article 3 of the Constitution states that anyone under investigation for a crime has the right to be informed of the right to remain silent and to have a competent and independent counsel. If they cannot afford one, the government must provide legal assistance. This isn't just a privilege. It's a necessity. Under Section 2, Paragraph A of the RA 743A, otherwise known as an act defining certain rights of persons arrested, detained, or under custodial investigation, anyone arrested, detained, or under custodial investigation must be assisted by counsel at all times. Even before formal charges are filed, the law ensures that the person under investigation isn't left vulnerable. And that's where competent counsel comes in. In the case of Inakay versus People, the Supreme Court ruled that representation by an unlicensed attorney is a serious violation of due process, requiring a new trial. Ang isang abogado ay hindi pwedeng andyan lang for the show. Dapat tunay siyang abogado at nagtatrabaho para sa kanyang kliyente.
It really seems that every stage of the legal process is designed to ensure fairness. But what happens if the accused pleads guilty? Can the prosecution just take that as an automatic win?
Great question, Kate. Not at all. A guilty plea, especially in capital offenses, must be made voluntarily, knowingly, and with full understanding of its consequences. The Supreme Court clarified this in the case of People versus Tagal, where the accused improvident plea of guilt was deemed invalid because it was not accompanied by sufficient evidence proving guilt beyond reasonable doubt. The court ensures that the accused isn't prejudiced simply because of an unwise or uninformed plea. Justice demands that the prosecution still carries its burden to establish the crime and the accused's participation through concrete and moral evidence. It's not about shortcuts, Kate. It's about upholding fairness and truth.
And what about the right to choose your lawyer? Can the accused insist on a particular lawyer even if they cannot afford one?
Absolutely, Kate. The right to a lawyer of choice is protected, but not absolute. In the case of People versus Umilig in 2015, the court ruled that while the accused has the right to choose their counsel, this must not cause undue delays or prejudice the proceedings. And if they cannot afford their preferred lawyer, then the court can appoint a competent one to ensure their fair representation. This brings us back to the idea that justice system prioritize fairness and efficiency. Whether it's a chosen lawyer or an appointed one by the court, what matters is the accused's right to adequate and competent legal assistance.
Which also reminds me of the case of Cruz versus People in 2017. In this case, the accused argued that his lawyer's negligence deprived him of a fair trial. The Supreme Court pointed out that the clients are generally bound by their lawyer's actions, but gross negligence that results in a denial of due process can be an exception. However, the court found that Attorney Mosico still performed crucial tasks, such as filing a demurrer to evidence, cross-examining witnesses, and objecting to evidence. Additionally, the petitioner chose not to present evidence, which weakened his claim of negligence. The court emphasized that accusations against counsel must be supported by proof of harm and that due process demands a high standard for such claim.
Sounds like the justice system really tries to balance fairness for the accused and efficiency for the proceeding. And oh, I love how do you remember all these cases? Attorney Ivy's photographic memory strikes again.
I can't help it, Kate. These principles really stick. Like glue because they're essential to ensuring justice.
And at the end of the day, the justice system isn't just about convicting the guilty. It's about treating everyone, even the accused, fairly. Shortcuts in courtrooms undermine the foundation of the justice itself. Whether it's ensuring competent counsel, invalidating improvident pleas, or balancing the right to a lawyer of choice, the system is designed to protect fairness and truth for all.
And that commitment to fairness also extends to ensuring the accused has a meaningful chance to participate in their defense. One of the most serious violations of procedural due process is depriving someone of the right to be heard. In the case of Moslares versus Court of Appeals, the Supreme Court ruled that the accused was denied this right when they were not given the opportunity to present evidence. This wasn't just a procedural oversight. It undermined the entire case because the process itself was unfair. The right to be heard isn't just about the formality of participation. It ensures the integrity of the justice system by giving every person their chance to present their side. Without it, justice risks being reduced to a one-sided narrative. Cases like Moslares reminds us that fairness isn't just about results. It's about how those results are reached.
Wow, Attorney Ivy, that brings a whole new perspective. It's one thing to talk about ensuring a competent counsel, but the idea that accused can't even present their evidence? That's just unfair. It's a total collapse of justice. Muslares really underscores how critical it is to get the process right. Ay, naku, sa ating mga marites at madlang people dyan, pakinggan daw. Hindi lang ang isang side ng kwento, kundi pati ang kabila. Let's learn both sides of the story bago mang-judge, ha? Sabi nga, ang hustisya ay para sa lahat. At ang fairness, hindi yan chismis lang. But wait, hindi pa kasama dito ang karapatan natin malaman kung bakit tayo kinasuhan? I mean, paano ka lalaban kung hindi mo alam ang specifics? Imagine this. I got arrested. OMG, it's just a hypothetical scenario, of course. Suddenly, there are cops on my baby chubby trip, and I'm being dragged away for allegedly smuggling exotic mangoes. Mangoes of all things. All because I love mango float? Innocent ako, of course, but Do I at least get to know what crime I'm being accused of? Or is it just a absurd mix up of my snack stash being mistaken as a contraband?
Kate, fear not. Even in such an outrageous mango smuggling scenario, the law still has your back. The right to be informed ensures that you'll know exactly what you're being accused of so you can prepare a defense. This right isn't just for a formality. It is a fundamental safeguard against vague or baseless charges. And just to clarify, here how it's actually worked in practice. First, during the arrest, the law enforcement must inform you of the reason for your detention. This aligns with the Miranda doctrine, where you're told not just the right to remain silent, but also the general nature of the accusation. For example, an officer might say, you are being arrested for theft. So that alone gives you the idea of what you are dealing with. So let's say one of our viewers, let's say Sir Leo. Sir Leo is arrested for stealing a shiny black BMW from a posh neighborhood in Makati. Now the police officers arrived and handcuffed him and prepared to interrogate him about how he ended up joyriding in such a luxury wheels. But before they start questioning him, they must inform him of his Miranda rights. And it would go something like this. Leo, you are under arrest for theft. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one, one will be provided for you. So second, after the arrest, the case against you must be properly documented. This is where the prosecutors come in. They file a formal charge known as the information, which specifies the exact crime, when and where it supposedly happened, and other crucial details. So this ensures that an accused person is not left guessing. The police may conduct the investigation, but it's the prosecutor who decides what charges to be filed based on the evidence. Third, during the arraignment, under Rule 116 of the Rules of Court, arraignment is the stage where the accused is formally informed of the charges and must enter a plea. If this critical step is skipped, as seen in the case of spouses Romualdez versus Comelec and People versus Coloring, proceedings may be voided. Now, the court emphasized that arraignment guarantees the accused hears the specific allegations, safeguarding the right to a fair trial. And in addition, as highlighted in Admin Matter number 24-02-09 of the Supreme Court, procedural guidelines for preliminary investigation and inquest proceedings ensures cases proceed based on solid evidences. These guidelines emphasize the determination of the probable cause, which involves assessing whether sufficient facts or circumstances exist to lead a reasonable person to believe that a crime has been committed and that person or property in question is connected to the crime. So probable cause goes beyond a mere suspicion but falls short of absolute certainty. And it is established through direct observation, reliable witnesses, circumstantial evidence, or physical proof such as fingerprints or contraband. So judges must evaluate this when issuing warrants, weighing tangible evidence and credible information to prevent arbitrary actions. So this principle balances the need for effective law enforcement with the protection of individual rights, ensuring fairness throughout the justice system.
Exactly. The right to be informed isn't just about hearing the charges. It's about understanding them clearly. That's why the accused is also provided with copies of the complaint, the information, and other legal documents. This ensures they have all the necessary details to build their defense. Imagine if someone was charged with theft but wasn't told what exactly was stolen, how could they present an alibi or challenge the evidence? It could be like entering a battlefield blindfolded. That's why these rights is so crucial. It ensures fairness and prevents wrongful prosecution. This principle was reinforced in the case of Villarba versus People in 2020, whereas the Supreme Court ruled that vague accusations without sufficient information violate accused right to be informed. Similarly, in the case like People versus Kawili and Spouses Tayaman versus People, the court highlighted how insufficient or defective information can lead to dismissal or further proceedings to correct the charges.
So without being properly informed, the accused might not even know how to defend themselves effectively. That's a huge disadvantage. Attorney Ivy, what if the charges are unclear or there is a mistake on how the information is presented?
If there's a mistake, it could actually render the proceedings invalid. In cases like People versus BBB and Villarosa versus People, the court emphasized that defective or vague information undermines the accused's ability to prepare their defense. Courts take this very seriously because justice must be based on precision, not guesswork. And that's the difference between Miranda rights and the right to be informed of the nature and the cause of the accusation. The first ensures fairness at the moment of arrest, so the accused knows the rights before speaking to the police. The second guarantees fairness during prosecution, making sure they fully understand the case against them. One protects against forced confession and the other ensures a fair trial. So Kate, if you ever if you ever do get arrested, purely hypothetical of course, you'll know exactly what you're up against. No mystery mango charges, I promise.
That's right, Attorney Ivy. And at the end of the day, our justice system isn't just about punishing the offenders. It is about ensuring that every individual, whether guilty or innocent, is treated fairly. Procedural due process exists not just to resolve cases, but to prevent wrongful conviction. That's why we don't allow vague, rash, or misleading charges. The accused must be given every opportunity to defend themselves with full knowledge of the case against them. Otherwise, we risk turning our courts into a mere conviction factories instead of places where justice is truly served.
Wow, this conversation has really driven home how crucial these rights are. It's not just about giving someone their day in court, it's about making sure they actually have a fair fight. Thanks so much for breaking it down so clearly. Wow. It's clear that every right plays a vital role in ensuring justice is served fairly. But what happens when delays start piling up? Let's talk about another crucial right, the right to a speedy, impartial, and public trial. Attorney Ivy, why is this right so important for the accused?
The right to a speedy trial isn't just about moving things along. It's a protection against prolonged uncertainty and unfair detention. Under Section 16, Article 3 of the Constitution, every person is entitled to the speedy disposition of their case in judicial, quasi-judicial, or administrative bodies. Prolonged delays violate not only legal fairness but also personal dignity. Take Palakpak versus Sandigan Bayan, for example. The court strongly emphasized that delays harm both the accused and the credibility of justice system. This principle is reinforced in Republic Act number 8493 or the Speedy Trial Act of 1998, which sets strict timelines to prevent unwarranted postponements. And believe me, Kate, I once had handled a case where proceedings stretched for so long that witnesses couldn't recall the details they originally testified about. Justice delayed isn't just justice denied. It risks being justice forgotten.
That's spot on, Attorney Ivy. But delays don't just affect the accused, they compromise the integrity of evidences too. Witnesses forget, documents get lost, and even public trust in the judicial process diminishes. That's why the Supreme Court introduced the Admin Matter number 1506-10 or the revised guidelines on continuous trial of criminal cases. This aims to ensure the speedy disposition of criminal cases by setting a specific timelines and procedures for various stages of litigation. These guidelines encourage courts to resolve cases efficiently while still upholding fairness. Similarly, in Admin Matter number 12-11-2 of the Supreme Court, or the guidelines for decongesting holding jails, addresses issues like overcrowding by enforcing the rights of the accused persons to bail and a speedy trial. These two measures work hand in hand to guarantee efficiency without cutting corners. By ensuring timely proceedings, we avoid turning holding jails into places where individuals languish unnecessarily.
Prospect Allen and Attorney Ivy. Let me see if I understand this right. So, fairness means the accused gets a neutral and competent court, right? But what if, hypothetically speaking, someone like me gets in trouble? Let's say I accidentally got caught. Let me think of a scenario. Aha! What if hypothetically, of course, I accidentally get end up accused of something totally ridiculous? Let's say I'm caught red-handed sneaking out of the bakery with a tray of strawberry shortcake because I thought they were free samples. I mean, who doesn't love strawberry shortcakes? Then I walk into the court and realize the judge isn't kept the diet. What if they secretly hate carbs? Does that mean I'm doomed because my snack feeling crime conflicts with their dietary beliefs? What happens in situations like that?
Good point, Kate. The right to an impartial trial ensures that an accused is judged solely on the facts and not on the biases or personal opinions. Whether the judge loves carbs or hates them is irrelevant. The law demands fairness. This principle extends even to extraordinary circumstances like martial law. For example, in the case of Olaguer versus Military Commission, the Supreme Court held that the civilians must be tried in civilian courts if they remain open and operational, ensuring neutral and competent judgment beyond individual biases. In the case of Republic versus Desierto, reinforced the importance of impartiality, emphasizing that prejudices or undue influence undermine the integrity of trial process. Simply put, the judiciary exists to guarantee a fairness, not personal preferences or conflicts.
Wow, this impartiality thingy is so very uh it's really great to have this impartiality in the judicial system, no? But in terms of the delays, the case can actually be dismissed because of delay. And I see why this right is so important. But beyond legal technicalities, what's the real world impact of these delays for? Going back to the delay.
Okay, Kate? Delays have significant repercussions, far beyond what we see on paper. The right to a speedy trial safeguard against, first, oppressive pretrial incarceration. No one should endure indefinite detention without knowing when their case will be resolved. Second, mental distress and anxiety. Imagine being innocent but spending years and years trying to clear your name. It's emotionally draining and harmful. Third, we have impairment of defense. The longer a case drags on, the greater the risk that evidence deteriorates or witnesses become unavailable. Justice isn't about delivering a verdict. It's about the process itself being fair and humane. Trials should be about finding the truth and resolving disputes efficiently, not dragging people through prolonged uncertainty.
That's such a compelling way to explain it. Justice really isn't just about the outcome, it's about the journey going there. Thanks, Attorney Ivy and Prospect, for breaking it down in a way that even a short thief like me can understand. So, a timely trial doesn't just protect the rights of an accused, it safeguards the integrity of justice itself. Speaking of fairness in trial, let's dive into another crucial set of rights. The right to compulsory process, the right to confront witness, and the right to secure attendance of witness. Prosec Allen, Attorney Ivy, can you break this down for us?
Certainly, Kate, these three rights are closely intertwined and form the backbone of a fair trial. Let's start with the right to confront witnesses. This right provides the accused with the opportunity to challenge the evidence presented against them by the testing the credibility and reliability of the witnesses through cross-examination. It also gives the court the chance to observe the demeanor of and behavior of the witnesses during their testimony. This guaranteed under Section 1F, Rule 105 of the revised rules of criminal procedure, ensuring transparency and fairness. And in the case of People versus Dominguez in 2018, the Supreme Court emphasized that confrontation is indispensable to testing the accuracy and truthfulness of witness testimony. And likewise, in the case of Kim Leong versus People, the court underscored how cross-examination serves as a tool to verify the credibility of witnesses and uncover any motives to fabricate evidence. And the case of People versus Ang, it didn't exclusively center on the right to confrontation, but it did explore its application in scenarios involving depositions and other discovery tools typically associated with civil cases. And here, the court reiterated that confrontation must occur whenever witnesses present testimony that influences the outcome of the case, and reinforcing the jurisprudence like in the case of Cuenco Viuda de Manguera versus Pisos.
That's right, Prosect. And here is an important distinction. The right to confrontation doesn't mean that cross-examination always takes place. It means the accused must be given the opportunity to cross-examine. If the defense waives this right by failing to act, the testimony remains valid as clarified in People versus Escote Jr. However, if the defense is deprived of this opportunity for reasons outside their control, such as procedural errors, the witness's testimony can be stricken off the record as ruled in the case of People versus Senaries. These safeguards ensure that no one is unfairly disadvantaged when presenting their defense.
Now, let's talk about the right to secure attendance of witnesses. So, the accused cannot effectively confront witnesses without first ensuring that they are present in court. So, these rights guarantees the ability to summon witnesses who can provide evidence in their favor. Under Rule 115, Section 1G of the revised rules of criminal procedure, courts can issue subpoenas to compel witnesses to appear. In the case of People versus De La Cruz in 2008, the court highlighted the significance of the right in ensuring that the accused has access to witnesses who may support their defense. The law is clear. The defense must actively assert this right during trial or they risk losing out on a critical testimonies.
That makes a lot of sense. So the right to confrontation protects the accused from unfair testimony, and the right to secure witness helps them build a defense. But what happens when witness outright refuses to appear?
That's a great question, Kate. That's where the right to compulsory process comes into play. Under Section 14, Paragraph 2 of Article 3 of the Bill of Rights, the accused has the constitutional right to compel witnesses to testify or produce evidence. To enforce this, courts can issue subpoenas ad testificandum or for witnesses to testify and subpoena decus tecum for the production of documents or other evidences. And if a witness unjustifiably refuses to comply, Rule 21, Section 8 of the Rules of Court allows the court to issue a warrant for their arrest. So sa madaling sabi, hindi maaaring tanggihan ng testigo ang kanyang obligasyon na humarap sa korte kung ito ay mahalaga sa pagresolba ng kaso. So this legal mechanism ensures that witnesses cannot evade their responsibility to assist in delivering justice.
That's right, Prosec. The right to compulsory process guarantees access to vital witnesses and evidences, even in cases where individuals are unwilling to cooperate. The Supreme Court has consistently reiterated the importance of subpoenas in securing both testimony and evidence critical to the resolution of the case. Whether you're accused of a crime or defending yourself, the law provides robust tools to ensure justice is upheld. However, Kate, the key is knowing how and when to use these rights proactively. If the defense doesn't act, they might lose the opportunity to protect themselves effectively. Kung nais mong ipagtanggol ang sarili mo, kailangan gamitin ang makarapatang ibinibigay ng batas.
You know how these rights work together. So, without the right to confrontation, the accused wouldn't be able to challenge the accusation. Without the right to secure witnesses, they wouldn't be able to mount proper defense. And without compulsory process, the entire system could be undermined by missing testimonies and evidence. Amazing. So, Prospect Allan and Attorney Ivy, do you have any real-life examples where these rights have made a critical difference?
Oh, absolutely. One of the cases which is a crucial witness initially refused to appear in court due to fear. So we had to invoke the right to compulsory process to ensure their attendance. So their testimony turned out to be vital, leading to a just verdict. So this highlights why these rights exist to ensure that the trial is fair and that no side has an undue advantage. Ang katotohanan ay dapat marinig kahit minsan ito ay mahirap makuha.
And on the defense side, I once handled a case where my client was accused based solely on the statement of a single witness. During cross-examination, we exposed inconsistencies in their testimony, weakening the prosecution's case. Without the right to confront witnesses, my client wouldn't have had a fair chance to defend themselves. Kung hindi na cross-examine ng saksi, maaring naging iba ang hatol ng korte.
That's incredible. It really shows how these rights are not just legal formalities. They're crucial to safeguard for justice. Attorney Ivy, Prosec Allan, we've talked a lot about these three deeply intertwined rights. But another fundamental right tries into all of this. The right of the accused to be present during trial. Could you walk us through its significance?
Indeed, Kate, the right to be present during trial is a cornerstone of a fair judicial process, ensuring that the accused can actively participate in their defense. Under Rule 115, Section 1, Paragraph C of the Revised Rules of Criminal Procedure, the accused has the right to personally defend themselves at every stage of the trial, from arraignment to the promulgation of judgment. This ensures that they can hear the evidence presented against them, challenge witnesses, and consult with their counsel. Sa madaling salita, ang presensya ng akusado sa paglilitis ay isang pundasyon ng makatarungang proseso.
That's correct, Attorney Ivy. The presence of the accused is crucial during arraignment, where they must personally enter their plea. Throughout the trial, being present guarantees transparency and prevents any surprises in the proceedings. However, while this is a fundamental right, there are instances where the trial may proceed even without the accused, which is known as the trial in absentia.
Interesting. In what situations can a trial continue even if the accused isn't there?
So under the law, Kate, trial in absentia can only happens if these three conditions are met. First is the accused has been arraigned. Second, the accused were duly notified of the trial. And third, the absence of the accused is without a valid justification. As established in the case of People versus Tigano in 2009, if an accused who has been properly arraigned jumps bail or escapes from detention, the court can proceed with the trial without them. So this is considered a voluntary waiver of right to be present. But take note, while trial in absentia allows the court to proceed, it does not mean that the accused is stripped of all his constitutional rights. Their counsel can still appear or represent them to ensure fairness.
That makes sense. But what about in promulgation of judgment? Does the accused always need to be present?
That's a good question, Kate. Ideally, yes. However, in judgment in absentia is permitted if the accused, after being notified, still fails to appear without just cause. The Supreme Court ruled in various jurisprudence that for a valid promulgation in absentia, there must be a two. First is the judgment must be recorded in a criminal docket, and second, a copy must be served to the accused or to their counsel. So this ensures that the accused is properly informed of its decision. And if they fail to appear within 15 days after the judgment is recorded, they lose the right to challenge it unless they surrender and justify their absence within that specific period.
That's a crucial safeguard. The law balances the accused rights with the need to prevent delays in justice. For instance, in Senate versus People, the Supreme Court emphasized that an accused cannot delay the process by simply refusing to appear. And on an international level, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights upholds the same principle. While an accused has the right to be present, court must also ensure that trials proceed efficiently. Hindi maaring abusuhin ang karapatan upang maantala ang hustisya.
That's fascinating. It's clear that these aren't just technicalities. They're essential to ensuring fairness while preventing manipulation of the system. So, Prosec Alan, Attorney Ivy, any real-life cases where these principles made a critical impact?
Oh, absolutely, Kate. In one of my cases, an accused attempted to evade trial by fleeing after the arraignment because of trial in absentia. We were still able to proceed and secure a conviction based on strong evidence. So this proves that justice cannot be stalled by a mere absence.
Actually, I had a case where my client was unjustly convicted in absentia due to improper notification. We successfully appealed because procedural due process was violated. This underscores why courts must carefully ensure that an accused's rights are not disregarded even in their absence. Hustisya pa rin dapat ang manaig.
Wow, these cases really show why the right to be present and the doctrine of trial in absentia are so important. They're like the guardrails of fair and transparent legal system. Without them, it's like driving in a steep mountain road without any brakes. Scary, right? Justice could end up either stuck in a traffic or heading straight into chaos. Kaya naman, siguraduhin ang bawat hakbang sa paglilitis ay makatarungan at ayon sa batas. After all, fairness isn't just a goal. It's the GPS that keeps the whole justice system on track. Now let's touch on the waiver of rights. Prosec Alan, you mentioned earlier that an accused can waive certain rights. Could you elaborate on this? What should an accused understand before making such a decision?
Yes, Kate, an accused person can waive certain rights, but this must be done knowingly, voluntarily, and intelligently. meaning they must fully understand the consequences of their decision, and there should be no coercion rather, and undue pressure. The Supreme Court made this clear in the case of Ogayan versus People, where they emphasize that a waiver must be clear and unequivocal to be valid. Otherwise, a hasty or uninformed waiver could jeopardize their entire defense. So sa madaling sabi, hindi basta-basta pwedeng isuko ang karapatan na hindi nauunawaan ang maaring maging epekto nito.
Exactly. And there are waivable rights, which an accused can legally surrender, and non-waivable rights, which are so fundamental that they must always be upheld. Some of the common waivable rights include the right to remain silent. The accused may choose to speak, but must be aware that anything they say can be used against them. Next, the right to counsel. They can opt to proceed without a lawyer, but courts ensure this decision is made with full awareness of its risks. Next, the right to be present during trial. An accused may waive this, especially if they refuse to attend despite due notice. Next, the right to preliminary investigation. This can be foregone if the accused wishes to proceed directly to trial. And the right to speedy trial. These can be waived if the accused agrees to delays for strategic or personal reasons. Next, the right against unreasonable searches and seizures. The accused may consent to a search, effectively waiving this protection. However, some rights are so crucial that they cannot be waived under any circumstances. This includes the right to a fair trial. Justice must always be served properly, ensuring due process. Next, the right to be informed of the nature and cause of accusation. The accused must always know what they are being charged with. Third, the right against torture or inhumane treatment. This is an absolute right under both local and international law. Fourth, right to life, liberty, or property without due process. No person can surrender these constitutional safeguards. And finally, right to an impartial judge. A neutral decision maker is essential in any judicial process.
That's a great breakdown. But what happens if an accused voluntarily waives their right to remain silent, but later retracts it? Can their previous statements be used against them? Why or why not?
That's a good question, Kate. Once an accused voluntarily waives their right to remain silent, any statements they make can be used against them, provided that the waiver was done knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily. However, retracting the waiver later doesn't make those prior statements inadmissible. For instance, in the case of People versus Ison, the court upheld that voluntary statements obtained after a valid waiver of the right to remain silent are admissible as evidence, even if the accused changes their instance later. And those statements remain part of the record because the waiver was valid when it occurred.
Yes, and it's also crucial for the courts to ensure the waiver wasn't influenced by coercion or undue pressure. If an accused claims their confession was obtained under duress, whether physical, emotional, or psychological, and there's no direct evidence to support the claim, the court will rely on the totality of the circumstances test. This test considers factors such as the presence of legal counsel during the confession, the accused's mental state, their level of understanding, especially if they're illiterate, and whether the confession was truly voluntary. For example, in the case of People versus Bolanos, the Supreme Court recognized that even the absence of physical evidence of coercion doesn't automatically validate a confession. It's the context and manner of obtaining the waiver that determines its admissibility.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack. So, what about cases where the accused unknowingly waives the rights? Could that impact the outcome of a trial?
Absolutely, Kate. A good example would be the case of Baya versus Sandigan Bayan in 2020, where the accused unintentionally waived their right to a speedy trial by failing to invoke at it a proper time. So here the court ruled that this omission amounted to a waiver, even though delays affected the case. So this shows that being passive can lead to losing certain protections. Hindi sapat na magrereklamo sa dulo. Kailangan ipaglaban ang karapatan habang may pagkakataon pa.
Building on that, another example is People versus Rebato, where the court scrutinized the actions and decisions of the accused during trial to determine whether certain rights were implicitly waived. The court emphasized that all waivers must be made with a clear understanding of their impact. That's why courts go to great lengths to confirm that any waiver is truly informed and voluntary, protecting both the accused and the integrity of the justice system.
This discussion really shows why an accused must be careful when it comes to waiving rights. Whether it's an explicit waiver or unintentional one, the consequences can be serious, sometimes even irreversible. Kaya kayo guys, sa aming mga mahal na tagapanood, don't just give your waiver ng basta-basta lang. Alamin kung ano yon because once you waive it, there is no take backs. It's all about balance, protecting individual rights while ensuring justice moves forward fairly and efficiently. So, we've talked about the right of an accused to be present during trial. But let's flip the script because in certain stages, the presence isn't just a right, it is a duty. Prosec Allan, Attorney Ivy, could you walk us through the key moments when the law requires an accused to be in court?
Absolutely, Kate. The law is clear that there is a specific instances when the presence of the accused is mandatory. First and foremost, during arraignment and the plea. Rule 116, Section 1B of the Revised Rules of Criminal Procedure states that an accused must personally appear during their arraignment and must enter plea themselves. This is not just a procedural step. It's a safeguard that ensures that the accused understands the charges against them and is given the chance to plead accordingly. Without their presence, no valid arraignment can take place.
That's right, Prosect. Another key stage where presence is a duty is during trial when identification is at stake. Common sense and legal principle dictates that the prosecution must have the opportunity to identify the accused as the actual perpetrator of the alleged crime. In the case of People versus Salas, the Supreme Court emphasized that accused must be present when witnesses are testifying not just for their own benefit, but to ensure fairness in the proceedings. After all, trial rights aren't just for the accused, they also help ensure justice for the prosecution and the victims. Having the accused present allows witnesses to confirm their identity and prevents a wrongful conviction due to mistaken identification.
Exactly, Attorney Ivy. And of course, there's the promulgation of sentence, a moment that carries significant legal consequences. Under Rule 120, Section 6, a judgment must be read in the presence of the accused. This allows them to immediately hear the verdict, understand its implications, and, if necessary, assert their right to appeal. However, there's an exemption. If the case involves only light offense, the accused may waive their presence during promulgation. And on a related note, we should also remember that Administrative Circular Number 16-93 discontinued the requirement for a convicted person to personally appear before trial courts for the promulgation of an appellate court's judgment. In the case of Almeter versus People in 2013, the Supreme Court reaffirmed that when a higher court affirms or modifies conviction, the convict no longer needs to appear in the trial court for promulgation. And of course, as we discussed in our previous segment, There are instances where a trial may proceed even without the accused, but only after the arraignment, and if they were properly notified. So this principle is called the trial in absentia, which ensures that an accused cannot stall justice simply by refusing to appear. But before that stage, presence is absolutely required.
So presence isn't just about showing up. It's about ensuring fairness at every stage of trial. So the law really does strive to balance accountability with due process. At the end of the day, justice isn't just about punishment. It's about making sure the process is transparent, fair, and properly observed for everyone involved. Before we wrap up, I just can't ignore the elephant in the room. This isn't part of our planned topics, but with two brilliant legal minds here, I can't help but ask about our current events. Now, former President Rodrigo Duterte facing charges before the ICC for crimes against humanity. We've spent so much time unpacking the rights of the accused, the due process, the presumption of innocence, the right to a fair trial, and now here we are, witnessing the former head of state being accused on a global scale. Prosec Alan, Attorney Ivy, how does everything we've discussed apply here? Not just in the Philippine setting, but globally.
That's a fantastic question, Kate. Because this case goes right to the heart of what we've been talking about. The rights of the accused and the balance between accountability and justice. In the Philippines, every accused, whether an ordinary citizen or a former president, is entitled to the same constitutional guarantees, such as due process, the right to be presumed innocent, the right to confront witnesses, and the right to defend themselves at every stage of their proceedings. So these rights aren't privileges, they are the foundation of justice. But in the case of Duterte, this brings this discussion into the international arena, where the stakes are even higher. The International Criminal Court, or the ICC, is under the Rome Statute, upholds similar principles. No one is guilty until proven so beyond reasonable doubt. And the accused has the right to a fair trial with full legal representation. However, what makes this case unique is that Duterte himself has often been accused of denying these very rights to others during his war on drugs. Thousands of Filipinos were allegedly executed without trial, their rights ignored in the name of expediency. Now the tables have turned, and the global community is watching closely to see if the same principles of fairness and justice will apply even to the most powerful person.
Exactly, Prasek. And what's fascinating and honestly a little unsettling is that this case is more than just about Duterte. It's a test of accountability on a global scale. In the Philippine setting, we've seen challenges of ensuring justice when the accused is someone powerful. Cases take years, investigations stall, and the political climate can sway proceedings. The ICC was designed precisely to address situations where domestic justice systems appear or unwilling or unable to prosecute high-level perpetrators of grave crimes. But here's the twist. Even Duterte, as the accused, is entitled to the same protections he may have denied others. The ICC ensures he has the right to be heard, to confront evidence, and to mount a defense. This is the very essence of justice. It applies even to those accused of injustice. If Duterte is brought before the ICC, it will be a global showcase of whether the legal principles we've discussed, due process, fairness, the right to present a defense truly extends to everyone, regardless of their status.
And it goes beyond the present. The outcome of this case will shape the future of international justice. If the ICC succeeds, it reinforces the idea that no one is above the law. However, If ICC fails, then it emboldens future leaders to act with impunity, knowing that they can hide beyond national sovereignty as a shield against accountability. So the rights of the accused aren't just illegal safeguards. They are the last line of defense against tyranny, ensuring the power doesn't silence justice.
Wow. So what we're seeing is the very right that protect ordinary citizen now being tested on global stage applied to one of the most polarizing figures in recent history. It's almost poetic. The same system Duterte once stood above is now the system that must protect his rights as an accused.
Exactly, Kate. And whether people see Duterte as a hero or villain, this case forces us to confront a difficult but crucial truth. Justice is only real when it applies to everyone, even those accused of denying it others.
And that's a thought worth holding on to. Justice isn't about sight. It's about fairness, it's about accountability, and the courage to demand both, no matter who stands accused. Wow, what a conversation! We've uncovered so much of the right of accused from the due process to the international accountability. It's clear that these rights aren't just legal concepts. They're the backbone of fairness and justice. Prosecutor Allan and Attorney Ivy, thank you so much for sharing your expertise today.
Thanks for having us, Kate. These discussions are so important, and I'm glad that we could shed some light on these crucial topics.
I hope everyone leaves with a deeper appreciation for these rights. They protect all of us more than we realize.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of The Legal Edge. Whether you're studying law or just passionate about justice, remember, understanding a right is the first step to protecting them. Stay curious, stay informed. We'll catch you next time.